and infrastructure planning and investment. He received his city and regional planning degree from MIT and the MS and the BS from Peking University. He has conducted research for the U.S. Federal Highway Administration, USA Center for Disease Controls and Preventions, and the Georgia Department of Transportation, and a variety of other local governments in the United States as well as in China. So everyone, please welcome Professor Yang.
Mindy, thanks for the introduction.
Welcome.
It's a great honor to have this chance to share the forum with the other respected speakers and to have this conversation with you about urbanization in China. Professor Lu just gave a very nice description about the history of China's urbanization and the urban culture, and he also pointed out some important aspects of today's urban issues. And it was also interesting to notice that Professor Lu mentioned some travel by the floating population from the relative advanced economic regions to the hinterland of China. That indeed imposes very significant challenges to China's transportation system and also the general society at large. In the past years, when I conducted various research on China's spatial development and also transportation, and I traveled around China, and actually I just returned from China 2 days ago, And when I got this task to speak about something on urbanization in China, and I pick up this mobility or urban transportation issues, and I always wondered, what can I share with everyone? There's so many exciting things going on in China, right? And then I fell back for a while, and I think I might begin with some big things that is going on in China, right? If we close our eyes and we think of all the things we can read in the newspaper or internet, right? And probably we know, first, China is adding more vehicle population. And if you talk with Americans about Chinese, urban transportation, you talk with the older generation, they may say China is a kingdom of bicycle, right? And if you talk with the young generation, very likely they will refer to the car population, right? Think of the congested urban streets in Beijing. That surely is relevant to the increasing car population. By the end of the last year, Beijing reached 4.7 million or 4.8 million registered number of vehicles. And also, in the year of 2010, China has surpassed the USA and became the largest automobile market. And this increase in automobile population, of course, requires more investment in transportation infrastructure. And China has built a massive limited access highway. And of course, today, it's still not as big as the highway system in the United States, but by far, China has the biggest tolled highway system in the world. There's some not very reliable statistics which says that over 80% of the total highway is in China. In addition to that, if we have heard some recent speech by President Obama, when he tried to sell his high-speed rail plan to the Americans, he always refers to what is going on in China. He say, oh, China is building a massive high-speed rail network. If we do not catch up, we will fall behind. Those are something sounds positive when we talk about the current status as well as the future potential of urban and regional transportation in China. And we know that happens in the backdrop of fast urbanization. Right? You know, in the early 1950s, China has only about 500 million population. You know, we have limited islands of the urban centers, right? And that fast changing, particularly in the year of the 2000, we see huge agglomeration of urban population and economic activities in the Chinese megacities, such as Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, or Shenzhen, right? And also those mega regions, like Yangtze River Delta, Pearl River Delta, and the capital region. And if we zoom in a bit and take some additional look at the straight level, we may say, oh, there's a lot of challenges or uncertainties. Chinese cities are crowded with cars, and the congestion everywhere, right? And a lot of air quality problem and relevant health issues stemming from automobile emission. And in addition to that, we notice that the urban transportation system is not that well managed. China has a long history in terms of civilization, but in terms of urbanization and motorization, you know, China is still pretty young. You know, the car parks on the sidewalk, bicycles ride on sidewalks, not just on sidewalks, but in opposite direction. You know, a lot of streets have signals, but the drivers may not follow the signals. So if we want to have some big phrase to characterize the urban and regional transportation system in China, we may say, you know, a fast expanding system, an increase in personal mobility, and also a lot of uncertainties. And that also makes us wonder, what might be the future of the urban transportation or personal mobility in China look like? It's a very, very difficult question. Very, very difficult to forecast what might happen in the next 20 or 30 years. But at least we can try to talk about this problem from several different perspectives and also look at some policy potentials. The most dynamic part about the personal mobility or urban transportation in China is, of course, the increase in automobile ownership. We know, okay, it is increasing, right? It is increasing not only in Beijing, but also in many other first-tier and second-tier cities. You know. And the Chinese city government and the central government have been nice to automobile industry and also household automobile ownership in the past for various reasons. And only recently we saw some big changes. You know, on December 21st last year, the Beijing municipal government announced the change in policy, the car ownership through lottery. If you want to have a car, and you need to go through a lottery system. The basic idea is to reduce the increase of automobile population to 240,000 in 2011. So that is to say, to limit the growth rate from 15% or 20% to 5%. And of course, we do not know how the other cities might respond to this. Will they follow this or not? It's very, very difficult to say. And it's also difficult to predict how long Beijing's policy will last. But if we look beyond China and try to figure out what has happened in some other relatively advanced economy, like Japan, South Korea, or Western Germany and the United States. And we actually found out the government policy or some other geographic constraint of each nation may not be the determining factor of automobile population increase. The economic growth, the household income growth actually plays a very, very important role. Here we have the GDP per capita on the horizontal axis, and the number of automobiles per 1,000 people on the vertical axis. We can see a very close association between the level of economic development and the automobile ownership rate. Shanghai, which is represented by that red dot, appear to follow a similar height of motorization. So that tells us, if we talk about the future of the automobile ownership in China, there may or may not very much we can do in terms of restricting automobile ownership. The issue might be more relevant to what kind of automobile Chinese household might own. The big SUVs or small and compact, fuel-efficient cars, gasoline-powered vehicles versus electrified vehicles. Different vehicles surely have different energy implications and different environment implications. And also we notice that automobile ownership differs from automobile usage. As long as we have competitive alternatives to driving, we know the transit should be a good alternative. And in this field, when we conduct various research in China, we find out the regular bus system is not that attractive. The only alternative that can, to some extent, divert the car owners from driving is fixed guideway transit, like a bus rapid transit, or the subway, or the light rail. Because this mode has reliable travel time, regardless of the level of congestion on the streets, and that makes them attractive when the city streets become very crowded. Beijing is building a massive subway system. Shanghai is also working on that, and Guangzhou is working on that. And there are a group of other Chinese cities are also working on that. As urban planners, we know, oh, that's good, right? But we have also wished the situation might be much better if this system has been built 10 years in advance. Beijing might not be so congested as it is today. It's slightly beyond the city scale, right? When we talk about an intercity travel. And here in Atlanta, if we want to go to Chattanooga or go to Macon or Savannah, what is the travel alternative? We drive. We drive because we do not have other competitive substitutes. The interesting thing is that the Chinese government is not only building the massive high-speed rail intercity network. At the regional level, it's also creating something called intercity high-speed rail service. And for example, in Pearl River Delta, the Guangdong province government has planned 3,000 kilometer long intercity high-speed railway network. And this service will be operated at an hourly speed about 200 kilometers. And this really provides a very, very good alternative to driving. It's faster than driving, and the travel time is more reliable. As long as it get enough ridership, it's more energy efficient and more environment friendly. And of course, we always wondered, will Chinese people use this system? And here in Atlanta, for example, if we add more transit services, probably not many people come and use it. The low ridership will imply a huge subsidy needed for the operation of this kind of services. Now, if Beijing or Shanghai or other Chinese cities continue to build this kind of American-style suburbs, the Chinese transit system will run into the same financial bankruptcy situation as in the United States. The reason is that we know transit ridership has very, very strong correlation with how we use the land, how we build our urban physical environment. You know, the denser the cities are, the less the household drive, and the more they will take transit. And if we actually look at how dense the Chinese cities are, for example, you know, we have a 3D visualization of the density in Beijing and also in Boston. We will see a really huge agglomeration of the population around these windows. Second ring, third ring, fourth ring, and fifth ring. And in Boston, the situation is obviously different. And in Atlanta, the situation is also different. You know, we have a very small area of the high density area, and then once we go beyond the city core for 2 or 3 kilometers, we begin to see low density areas that does not support a transit riding. So that's good science. That's good science. And in addition to that, we know that the urban transportation is usually done by the local government, but the national leadership indeed matters a lot. If we look at some numbers about the capital investment in transportation in urban China, the Chinese government has spent a lot of money on road-based infrastructure, that's the highways. And consequently, if we compare the tripartite between China, USA, and the European unions, we can figure these numbers. The basic idea is that China has become increasingly similar to this advanced economy. And many of us do not feel comfortable about that. Maybe the switch toward a railway-based investment strategy might change the pace of motorization a bit. And we look forward to that. And today, it's still too early to say what might happen in the future exactly. Now, before I wrap up this conversation, I would like to say, when we talk about urban transportation, it's very important to know it's not just about automobile. It's not just about how we travel around. And there are many things relevant. The economic development, the energy use, the air pollution and prevention, and also the decision-making structures. Now, for example, I was in the Ford Motor Company's headquarters about 2 months ago, and they announced the electrified vehicle at that time point, and they really worry about the future of this new vehicle model in China. And the most frequent question I have got at that time point is, who is making decisions in China? For this kind of new technologies, how the central government make policy, how the local government make policy, really affect the profitability, the market of these vehicles. As similar perspective can help us to understand how Chinese government can make policies. Now, who is making policy really affecting what kind of automobile industry policy we might have? And think of that. If this who are making policies is still in a great demand for automobiles, well, think of that. If those who are making policies comes from the automobile industry, and what kind of policies we might have? We have good science, and we have said very, very bad things, even though we do not know how some policies are made exactly, at least based on the transportation outcome. we know something has been very, very bad in our policy-making process. And also, today, when people frequently ask, who are making policy in China, that probably also means China has switched away from the previously command and control style policy making. Right? Maybe the decision-making power has begun to be shared among a big group of individuals. And even though China is still the American-style democratic society today, and that it at least gives us some hope. Right? We hope the urban transportation system and the relevant policy making will begin to pay more attention to the air pollution, to some social issues, as mentioned by Professor Lu, and we look forward to that.
Thank you, Professor Yang. That's very, very interesting. I'm sure it has resulted lots of questions from the audience. But once again, we'll save all the questions in the end. Lastly, but not the least, we have Professor Yawei Liu. Dr. Liu is currently the director